Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining the monthly Fire Safe Sonoma Speaker Series. I'm Roberta McIntyre, President and CEO of Fire Safe Sonoma, and I will be your host today. We live stream this program on the fourth Tuesday of every month, except for the month of December, and on the third Thursday of November. You can find our past Speaker Series programs on our YouTube channel. And I kind of flubbed that. Forget about it. You can find our past speaker programs on our YouTube channel. There's a lot of great information there, so check it out. For those folks that might not know, Fire Safe Sonoma is the county-wide Fire Safe Council. And we've been working in the space and serving Sonoma County for 26 years now. Yep, that's right. We've been working in the space before Wildland fire safety and risk reduction was popular. Before we get started, I want to thank Team Fire Safe Sonoma today for helping out. With us today are our program administrator, Becca Fisher, and our former fellow and now our new Firewise program assistant, Alina Brammer. So don't forget to check out Fire Safe Sonoma's calendar for upcoming events. And we have our next board meeting coming up on September 22nd at 3:30 p.m. They're held virtually, and you are all welcome to attend. Fire Safe Sonoma is also excited to introduce the Community Work Party Project. We just started this. It involves our tool trailer and a Recology 20-yard bin and the Sonoma County Curbside Chipper Program. So the County of Sonoma is funding this for us. And if you are a Firewise community in good standing, or a Coke group or a local fire safety council and want to do what I call work party weekends, is give us a shout out, let us know you want to do that. And what we'll do is we'll bring out our tool trailer with all of our defensible space tools, and Recology will bring out a 20-yard bin, and y'all do your work party over the weekend. And then when you're all finished, at the end of it, you'll have piles of material that needs to be chipped. The following weekday or during the week, the Sonoma County Curbside Chipper crew will come out and chip up all the stuff you have ready to be chipped. And then again, funding for this project was made possible by the County of Sonoma with help from Recology of Sonoma Marin. Okay, so last month we heard from our very own board member, Sashi Saburatnam. I hope I did that well. Talking about PG&E's Wildfire Resilience Corridors Project program and their broader efforts to reduce wildfire risk and strengthen community resilience across California. This month, we're pleased to be joined by CAL FIRE Chief Ben Nicholls, who will share the updated CAL FIRE seasonal outlook. Chief Nicholls has over 30 years of experience with the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE, all caps. He's worked in a variety of programs and specialties throughout his career, including Wildland and Municipal Fire Protection, Emergency Command Center Operations, Fire Prevention / Law Enforcement, and pre-fire planning, among other things. In his current assignment, Chief Nicholls oversees and coordinates CAL FIRE's operations within the Sonoma Lake Napa unit, our unit. Chief Nicholls has also been a part of firefighting operations on all major wildland fires in Sonoma County since 2017. And I'm betting that goes all the way up to the Picket Fire. So let's give Chief Ben Nicholls a warm welcome. And I'm going to hand the reins off to you, Chief. And let's kick this off. And then I'll pop back up in the end to handle the Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you, Roberta. So this afternoon, I'm coming to you live from the Napa County Expo, I guess the former Napa County Fairgrounds down in Napa, the incident base for the Picket incident. So I pulled out some time. I would have rather have been over there with you guys, but here I am at the fire. So we'll run you through the fire season 2025 update for the August 28th update. So we'll move into our presentation. And go to the next slide. Oh. All right, we can go that route. Not sure what happened there, but that's okay. So we've talked about this in our prior fire season updates in the past. This is the monthly outlook, that's the 4-month outlook that's produced by our weather fire behavior team up in North Ops, up in Reading. That basically is our command and control for the northern part of the state. This was produced August 1st of this year. And you can see that in that graphic on the left, they're talking about an above normal potential for significant fire activity in that red area. And we were carved out on the coast. And the item of note is that our the normal area is basically the area west of 101. So today I'm over here in Napa County, seated in that red above normal area. So as we roll deeper into fire season, obviously that's going to change. They are talking about August and September are expected to be warmer than normal. I don't know about you, but we finally had to turn on the air conditioner in my house late August, mid-August, because we finally started to get summer-like weather. And so that held true with what they're predicting. So they're saying not only August, but potentially September as well, with some mixed precipitation anomalies. I don't know if any of it, I don't believe any of it made it over to Sonoma County earlier this week, but we actually received a light rainfall just south of the Pickett incident. Unfortunately, it didn't hit the Pickett incident itself, but that went with lightning activity that we had at the northern end of our unit out between sites Ladoga and Willows, which resulted in 2 fires from the lightning that came through there during that period of time. So they did say that lightning should be the most impactful during the month of August. So luckily we're on the backside of August at this point, and hopefully we can put the lightning behind us. Unfortunately, we do have still the offshore wind events that are still potentially ahead of us as we come into this fall period of time. And so that has not changed from any other time. And so we're looking at that for wind driving events October from the near Sacramento Valley all the way out to the coast. We're fortunate here in Sonoma County in that we have the benefit of that marine influence when the onshore is pushing. And so that will help us on the west side of the county where we have that marine influence that comes in while we have the normal weather conditions in our county. And then as you can tell, by the time we get out to November, hopefully that remains the same. Obviously, we'll have a September 1st 4-month outlook coming up here in a couple days. But as of now, they're talking about returning to a normal sequence of fire, significant fire potential. And something that I've hit before, but just in case there's new folks in the crowd today, is that it's not just fire potential, it's in those outlined areas. We're in the mid-coast region, which is the long, tall one from basically the San Francisco Bay up to the southern Humboldt. That when we're talking about significant fire potential, we anticipate significant fires during fire season. It's just whether or not it's going to be more than normal. And so that can be anywhere between 1 to 3 major fires going at the same time. So the Pickett going right now is the one significant fire in the area. So technically speaking, we're still in that normal range for significant fire potential. Next slide. Okay, so this is what we finished out July with as we came into the month of August for that 4-month outlook. As you can see, if you've been watching it over the course of this year, the drought monitor indices have crept up the state and continue to do so. So they'll do that until we get rainfall coming into the fall. But obviously, drought conditions create more opportunities for dry fuels that obviously feed the fire and allow for rapid fire growth. So locally, we're looking good compared to some of the other regions of the state. And then, as I mentioned earlier, July, I don't think the air conditioner hardly came on at all. And that graph shows that here in Sonoma County, we were below, if not well below average temperatures for the month of July. And so that helped keep a lid on the fire activity that we experience across the county and ultimately the state. Uh, Item of note that August, the lightning event that we had a couple days ago earlier this week, that produced the most lightning strikes in a single day for the northern region of the state. So was a very active month for lightning activity. Ultimately, there was a little under 55,000 lightning strikes observed during the month, which was a record for the last 13 years worth of data for the lightning activity in Northern California. During that period of time, we had 3 multiple day wind periods of red flag warnings. Luckily, most of those were to the north, as well as the wetting storm system that came through up north kind of kept a lid on the fires in the extreme north part of the state. Next slide. So the fire on the left is July and the fire on the right is the picket. So the item of note in that slide is roughly the same time of the day. That shot in July shows you the major cloud cover during the course of that day. But the thing I want you to take away from that slide is that brush up the hill from where that smoke was at. That fire was at the very top of Pine Mountain, for those that are familiar with it, that it took roughly 45 minutes for fire engines to get up to the fire due to its remote location. And the footprint that you see in that picture is pretty much what it was when the fire engines got there. So in a normal July afternoon, that was the end of July, that was the July 21st. For a fire like that in a normal July, that should have done much better than what it did. So with a good indication of where those fuels were at and what the weather's influence was on that fire. Fast forward to the photo on the right. That's the first afternoon of the picket incident on the 21st, this last Thursday, and a significant change in fire behavior due to those cured out fuels being receptive and an alignment of topography and wind pushing that fire from basically the valley floor of the Napa Valley up and over the Palisades into Etna Springs on the east side. Next slide. So why is that happening? So we've talked about the ERC, or the energy release component, but again, for a refresher for those that haven't been on or need an update, that's the energy coming off of the flaming front of the head of the fire in a wildland fire. It speaks to the fire intensity and how that how difficult for control that fire is going to be. So as you see on the graph, blue is the current year. Gray is an average year for the years between 2000 and 2022. And red is the maximum recorded values during that period of time. So you'll see that really it took us until early July even to get into what we consider the more critical burning windows. But then it was followed right behind by a drop back down into those lower figures in the 80th percentile. And we don't start getting concerned until we get above the 90th percentile. So we took that dip. And so that first yellow line that you see on the graph is the fire that I just pointed out on the top of Pine Mountain at the end of July. And so we were in a nosedive back down from those more critical conditions for those ERCs due to the prolonged cool and moist conditions that we were experiencing. But as you can see, the second yellow line is the afternoon that the picket fire took off. And so we were flirting with, if not just above, maximum recorded values for this day, this time of the year. So the green line that you can probably just barely make out to the right of that yellow vertical is the forecasted ERC values for the next 7 days. So while we're currently at maximum recorded, we should start dropping down a little bit. However, the incident meteorologist this morning for the briefing indicated that we've got another warm, dry weekend coming up ahead of us. So that may or may not fall. We may just kind of plateau there for a bit and hang out in that 90th, 97th percentile range, which obviously gives us concern for ignitions and then our ability to control those fires once they're off and running. Next slide. So we talked about the energy release component. Now we roll into the 1,000 hour fuel, the dead forest fuels on the forest floor. These are the larger materials. And when we talk about 1,000 hour fuels, it takes 1,000 hours for them to react to the moisture available in them to burn. And so, again, it repeats what we saw in the energy release graph, where we had very mild, if not moist conditions all the way into basically late May. And then it got back into a normal routine and dipped below where we would be average, flirted with some of those lowest recorded values. And then now that green line is running right along the maximum, or in this case, the minimum recorded values for that 1,000 hour fuel. So if we want to talk about good news, when you look at your trends for the window of opportunity for fire season, we're really close to that period of time where we're going to start taking on moisture as we come back out of the heat of summer into fall and ultimately whatever winter looks like. So we talked about it earlier this year, where we talk about the length of the opportunity for extreme fires during fire season. So the fact that we're starting in August gives that a much smaller window, assuming we get our rainfall in October that we should get for those catastrophic fires that we've all experienced. Next slide. Another critical thing that we look at is the live fuel moisture in the brush. And so we just talked about that with the Pine Mountain fire versus the Picket fire. You can see that over the course of a year, the brush, in this case, we measured the live fuel moisture in the brush, which is a major driver of some of our large devastating fires. And so you can see over the course of a year that brings on moisture as it goes through its growing cycle. And then as it finishes its growing cycle and we come into summer, then it goes into a dormant state and the moisture evaporates out of that brush. And so when we talk about our concerns about rapid fire growth, resistance to control, we worry about that 60th percentile as far as being critical burning conditions. And as you can see, all but one, and that may be an anomaly for the Canocti location for where that moisture is at, but all of them are in a nosedive down towards that critical level. But as you can see on the graph, the gray dotted line is the average for the unit where that brush fuel moisture is at. So we're below average for where we should be this time of the year, but we're not in that critically low recorded range, which is the red line at the bottom of that graph. But we fully anticipate here when the next fuel moisture is pulled next month that'll be deep into the critical range and obviously an item of concern for us. Next slide. So some perspective on this year versus last year. This year, the Sonoma Lake Napa units responded to 300 wildland fires for a total of just over 8,100 acres, compared to last year at 257 fires for just shy of 24,000 acres. So we've gone to more fires this year, but we haven't had the acres burned that we did. If you remember last year, those were the early season fires between the Point Fire and the Sites Fire that were Father's Day of last year. And so the remainder of the fire season, there wasn't a lot of acres burned through wildland fires. So this year is a more lower setup to our larger fires, with the Picket Fire currently pushing what is it? Pushing 7,000 acres, just shy of 7,000 acres. So most of those acres have been burned on this fire. Next slide. So what we have in store for the remainder of the year for the long range forecasting, the incident meteorologists early in the summer, if you remember, were talking about the concerns about flash drought. They kind of backed off of that with the summer that we had. It's still a possibility, but it's not a probability. So that's some good news there. But you can see that ultimately we are expected to be above average for our temperatures September, October through November. So that's obviously a concern for us because that gives more opportunity later into the fall season where our fire occurrence should be diminishing. But the good news is that we have equal chances for what our normal rainfall would look like. So the only time we get concerned is when we see below average. So that's where the forecasters believe that there's a pretty decent chance at this point that we will see some good precipitation as we come into the winter. And that should do it. I'll open it up to any questions. Okay, someone posted earlier, unless
Yeah, got it. Sorry, I lost the mute button for a minute. We do have a question and a follow-up in the chat. So just remind all the folks, now is the time for the Q&A. And so, yeah, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We've got a couple here now that we're going to take a look at right away. So one right out of the gate is, what have you all learned from the picket fire? And are there any lessons we could take away for our efforts to be prepared in other communities in the region?
what lesson you've learned from the picket fire?
Anything remarkable maybe that we learned from the picket fire, this recent fire?
Nothing remarkable. So the good news about the picket fire was that the area that it burned in was a steep, remote area. So no threat to lives and or residences. There was obviously damage to agriculture as that fire came up and out of the valley floor in the Napa Valley. But that's to be expected with a slope wind alignment under those conditions. The afternoon that the fire kicked off, we were a little over 100 degrees in the Napa Valley and did not change much in the first couple of days of the fire. So it could have been a much more significant fire. If folks remember the glass and the lightning and some of the other fires, we could have easily been up in Lake County in short order, and or there was a threat to the Berryessa estates if that fire had continued to burn as it was in those first couple afternoons. But the fire ended up laying down once we got out of that topography. So the takeaway is that topography really hampered firefighting efforts because we can't get fire engines to it. Hand crews, these the last couple of days have been hiking an hour and a half to 2 hours to get into their line assignment just to begin cutting line and mopping up. So that's taken a toll. Luckily, we've not had many line emergencies at this point, but that's something that's square in our thoughts when the folks are working that hard to get just into their assignment, let alone work on the firefighting effort once they get in there. So, yeah, I think that would be where we left it.
There's a follow-up question there, but I'm going to embellish it a little bit. The question is, they're interested in fire behavior in regrowth areas within the footprint of previous fires. So I'm going to take that step further, Chief. And in your experience with fires, let's say you've had a fire one season, went back to the same area with another fire following season. What's the fire behavior like there? And I'm curious to know if the fire behavior is more wicked well, certainly it'll be more wicked the further we get away from that earlier fire. But I'm wondering, like year to year to year, how much more wicked does that fire potential get each year after a burn, if that makes sense?
Sure. So it's funny you bring that up because as I was preparing for this over the last month or so, I was adding pictures of fires that we had and building a list of fires that had occurred in the 2020 lightning footprint, the 2017 Tubbs footprint, the 20, let's see, lightning, Tubbs, oh, and the Valley Fire. So we had multiple fires that basically one of the fires on the top end of Lake Berryessa a couple weeks ago. I can't remember the name of it, but it went 60 acres somewhere in there. And the comment from the incident commander was that they were able to focus all their resources on the right flank because the left flank had basically put itself out. It didn't have fuel enough to do what it needed to do. Berry fire. Thank you, Peter. You're on it. Uh, so exactly, that was the berry fire. And so that fire, there was a fire up on Spruce Grove Road in Lake County between Clear Lake and Clear Lake Oaks that were burning in footprints either 2017 or 2020 that historically would have been a much more significant fire, but because that brush hasn't gotten back to that mature decadent state, it didn't create the control issues that we would have historically seen. So a couple different fires around Berryessa proper where there wasn't that brush component allowed for a successful containment of those fires in the initial attack phase, as well as Lake County. And then the Mark fire that we had the same day of the Berry fire in the Mark West drainage, basically between Redwood Hill Road and the Mark West Lodge, burned in an area that was impacted by the Tubbs. And so now, to Roberta's point, there's periods of time where our fire adaptive tree species, be it bay laurel or coast live oak, that will re-sprout from their burned stumps with that period of growth that they had. Now you're talking about a 15-foot tall, especially when it comes to bay, a 15-foot tall source of fire because bay burns very well. And so that's the concern, is that the farther we get away from the wildfire event before we're able to reintroduce good fire, creates a more opportunity for a more intense fire and or more resistant to control on our part, and potentially a stand replacing fire, right? So when you've got a Doug fir stand that was heavily impacted during the wildfire event, and then you go say 7 years ish till the next fire, and now you have a built up bed of dead and down heavy fuels from the mortality from the first fire, plus the regrowth of your bays and oaks. You can wipe out the rest of the stand of the timber, the conifers, and then be left with this alteration in that vegetation makeup in that area. So
Yeah.
ultimately, if we had it our way, we would get in within 5 years of that wildfire to that area to bring lower intensity good fire through that area to help now reset that clock and get that space between the forest floor, what we call the ground fuels, and the canopy, to remove those ladder fuels to get back to a more resilient stand of vegetation.
That makes sense. I'm also curious too, to just intuitively, what are your thoughts if you're making a fire attack? It's like, oh, this thing burned last year. We can kind of take it kind of easy or expect to have not to put too many resources on this side or that side, kind of a thing. That I imagine that folds in. But I'm kind of curious, is there a number of years past the previous fire where you just kind of throw all that out the window and it's like starting fresh? Just
It really, it, re-
intuitive.
yeah, it really depends on the vegetation type. You know, when we're talking about larger fires, there's been a lot of success in the Sierra where you have some of those larger fire footprints. That was hoped to be used during the Dixie fire, and in some portions of that fire it was successful. In other portions, to your point, Roberta, it had been too long and it carried through there without slowing down. So it really depends on, again, the slope wind alignment for the day, the burning conditions when the fire gets to that point in the area, and what the vegetation makeup is on the landscape there.
Would you agree that putting prescribed fire on the ground in those areas after prior fire to take advantage of that occurrence could be pretty helpful, beneficial if we can do that?
Absolutely. That good fire is critical to finishing out that process, because the thing that we have to keep in the back of our mind is that wildfire by itself is not necessarily as significant as we make it out to be, because we lose homes and at times people in the way of that fire. But the California landscape is a fire adaptive landscape, and it actually needs fire in order to be the beautiful place that we all like to live in, and people come from across the world to visit. And so if the fire comes off the landscape, we're creating conditions that add to that devastation downstream with those wildfires that we know we're going to see.
Yeah, that makes sense. New question, change the topic a little bit. How long have the maps that you presented here, the fire projection and geographic areas, how long have those been kept?
Maps.
I guess that the way you guys, I'm going to interpret that as, to the degree that you have the predictive services
Oh
to
yeah,
be able to, how long has that been as robust as it is now? I guess maybe
you
I'm
know
reading too much into
that
that.
that's a really good question. I don't have the answer for that. That's been a lot around as long as I've been a firefighter, so that's 32 years now, I guess. So I could look into it, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I imagine with modern tech and LiDAR and everything else that the predictive services unit's got to be getting really good at what they're doing.
Yeah, well, and so I mean the map products are the map products, right? But the data that supports the map product you saw about above normal, normal, and below, that data goes back to the early 1940s when California Division of Forestry at the time was keeping those records. So um, roughly, what would we say, 100, almost 100 years, 80 years, I guess, would be
Wow.
the amount of information they're pulling from.
Wow. Yeah. So they've got some really good data to work with, more than just a 5-year trend.
Yeah.
Let's see. Um, there's a question about when will this, yeah, I'm getting to that, Iris. I'm trying to save that for a little bit later to keep it topical, but I'll put it out there. So question from someone is asking, and I think this is more of an insurance commissioner's office question. Uh, and Iris, if you can maybe put it in the chat a little bit to maybe be more specific. But she's asking, when will the Safer from Wildfire program be finalized?
Yeah, I'm not aware of what that
Yeah,
is.
Safer from Wildfire, to my knowledge, is tied to the California Insurance Commission office. They have their Safer from Wildfire program married to their, the insurance discounts for being Firewise community and good standing, et cetera. Let's see. Um, Iris, do you just want to go off mute and answer ask the question directly to maybe clarify it? I'm not sure if she's able to do that. Um, okay. I don't see any more questions in the queue, but I feel like it's a little too early to call it good.
The one thing I will put out, I was just thinking about as far as not so much lessons learned, but things that were reinforced during this firefight was those pre-identified fire breaks, shaded fuel breaks, and or in this case in Napa County dozer lines that allowed the incident commander and the initial attack resources because this fire was burning in the glass fire footprint. So we were talking right around 5 years from the last fire that allowed a quicker production of the dozer lines that were ultimately used to contain this fire. There was a lot of indirect work early on because of that steep topography. So instead of being right on the fire's edge, the bulldozers and hand crews were cutting line on that ridge line away from the fire in that steep canyon to be able to help contain that fire. So a lot of that work being done and or looking at long-term projects as we've talked with so many folks about with picking up those pod lines, picking up those natural delineations between watersheds. Those really are those critical areas that allow us when we have that fire that escapes that initial attack phase to be able to box it in before it becomes any larger than it has to be.
So it feels like if I can summarize the takeaway there, the community scale field breaks are helping. Yeah.
So,
Go ahead,
so when
Iris. Yeah.
Hi.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
clarify your question.
I had the good fortune of being trained with the CAL FIRE home hardening certification. I think Chief Nicholls was there. And one of the things that you were talking about was whether or not the IBHS standards on how to protect homes was strong enough. And it seems to be the Safer from Wildfire seems to be regulations that there are being considered are pretty parallel with what people need to do to protect their home. And there's other underwriting insurance underwriters that are also paralleling this 0 to 5, the importance of removing anything that's combustible within the 5-foot zone of the house. Does Chief Nicholls have any comments about that? I know that you're mostly in the forest, but the rest of us are living in homes and we're trying to protect ourselves from when wildfires kind of get out of, into the threat of homes.
So 0 to 5 is currently is an insurance component, but is on short final to becoming state law as well. So under the Public Resources Code, tied into 4291, which is the current defensible space standards that the department inspects to. So that 30-foot zone from the house out to a 100-foot zone or the property line, whichever comes first. To your point, Iris, that has made a significant difference in rural communities where we have an intermix, a wildland intermix versus an interface, where we don't have the close proximity of structures. What we have found, obviously, in the last 10 plus years, basically starting with the Valley Fire in 2015, was that the material within 5 foot of the home can absolutely a smoldering bark fire and ornamental bark in that 5 foot zone can be what destroys your home, not the 200-foot wall of fire that goes back down to the ground on the outskirts of the community. So 0 to 5 is a thing. It's only going to be reinforced by the Public Resources Code. The Board of Forestry is trying to figure out how to best implement because at the end of the day, there's a lot of concerned citizens and rightfully so about removing everything flammable in that 0 to 5 foot zone. But those that are looking to ensure that their home is as hardened as possible before that fire event, that would be what you would do. But they are looking at exceptions as far as how a plant is planted in that area, whether or not it's in a pot versus in the ground. We in the 90s, and I think even before the 90s, had a published list of fire safe plants. We don't do that anymore because during those significant fire conditions, everything burns. And so 0 to 5 is a thing, and it absolutely will make a difference in the long run.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Here's one that's interesting. I didn't realize this was an issue, but it doesn't surprise me. Do you have any comments on the illegal drone activity during the picket fire?
A whole lot of drones out there at this point, and a lot of folks that like to take a lot of neat photos. But as we saw down in LA this January, that was the most recent one. There was a hole the size of, I think, almost a basketball that was punched into a wing of one of the super scooper air tankers down in Southern California. So you have rolled sheet metal over a frame, and a
Right.
plastic drone was able to do that sort of damage. So just imagine what would have happened if that had gone through the cockpit or into the engine proper. So drones are a serious concern. We continue to have drone incursions on our fires, and when that happens, all firefighting aircraft come off the fire until that's dealt with. So there was a recent fire. Oh man, I don't remember which one it was, but we've had one here in the unit, and there's been multiple other ones. So yes, we ask that private drone pilots. We basically put a flight restriction over the fire area during our firefight, so that not only are UAS pilots excluded, but all civilian aviation and military aviation. So basically, we create a cylinder around that fire area so that our aircraft can work uninterrupted to combat that fire. So that's a real deal. And if law enforcement finds that person who's flying that drone in that restricted airspace, that person's going to have a problem.
I wonder, do you know if there's a way to kind of monitor the drone frequencies, the radio control frequencies, to be able to find those people? Because that's pretty wicked, especially if you're, crashing through the wing or fuselage of an aircraft. That's terrible. With
Yeah.
that said, or for the first question, do you know if there's a way to narrow down through using like the FCC would do to find somebody with an illegal ham license or
Well,
illegally using ham frequency?
uh, I don't know about the frequencies just because there's so many different frequencies out
Right.
there. In the case of the air tanker down in Southern California, I believe parts of that drone that were recovered led them back to the individual who bought the drone in the first place. So that person, I'm 99% sure, was found and held responsible for doing what they did.
So with that in mind, it just kind of inspired me to think about maybe we can collaborate on this, maybe doing a campaign on telling people not to do the drone thing during fires. I'd be really thrilled through Fire Safe Sonoma to work collaboratively on doing an educational campaign to tell people, don't do this. This is stupid. Because I mean, if it's going to have adverse impact on the fire. If you get a drone in there and then air ops are held off until that's dealt with, you're going to burn more acres, and potentially burn more homes, and maybe grow the fire logarithmically to where it's going to outpace the resources and all the work you've already done. And that's just nuts. You could tell I'm kind of PO'd about that.
Yeah. No, there's been a handful of significant fires, and without them in front of me, I would be remiss to put them out there. But there's been some significant fires that part of the history of that fire was that drones were found in the airspace, so aircraft were grounded until that was dealt with, and that fire was allowed to grow without being checked by air resources, right? The ground resources are still engaged, but the air resources are off until that's dealt with. So
Okay, more in line. We have a couple questions. I'm going to try to keep this topical before we run out of time. There's a couple I can answer pretty quickly, but what is the schedule of issuance of the 4-month outlooks throughout the year? I know we used to do this once a year, and then we discovered that that wasn't enough. So now we work with you, Chief, to do the seasonal outlook twice a year. So I guess back to the heart of the question, what's the schedule of issuance of the 4-month outlooks?
so the first of every month is when that next issuance, the next 4-month outlook is issued. So September 1st, there will be the next 4-month outlook on top of the August 1st. So throughout the course of the year, the first of the month is the date that new outlook gets updated.
Okay. Let me go down to the end here and see what we got. Okay, so we've got like 3 questions in here that are really more about structural hardening and firewise, and less about the seasonal outlook. So, and we have about 51 minutes left, so I'll go ahead and field them. Maybe you and I can, collaboratively tackle these. So, first up, more of a Firewise certification question. Actually, you don't get certified as Firewise, you get accredited. But what are your thoughts on how to convince an unwilling neighbor to reduce their fire load on their property that is adding fire risk to their neighbors? With us at Fire Station Sonoma, we deal with that from time to time. We were just at a presentation, Alina and I, a couple of days ago, and that question came up. And number one, try to make friends with your neighbor, and little by little kind of educate them and share with them the impacts that we could all make collaboratively as an aggregate to reduce the community wildfire risk. If they're an unwilling neighbor, then I think the best you can do is make sure your property is in compliance, and then call up, local fire and say, hey, my neighbor, I feel like they're out of compliance. Can you come and look at this? But again, make sure your property is in compliance before you make that call. Because when I was a fire marshal, I would go look at the complainant's property first, and then go to look at the person in question's property. Any thoughts about that? Any sage advice on how to kind of bridge that little bit of a conflict potentially?
One of the things that has become apparent here in the last handful of years is that, again, the traditional wildfire was homes on ridges away from built up areas. And so now with those subdivisions that are burning, it's not a matter of you're affecting yourself, you're affecting your neighborhood, right? It's not just your home that's at risk. It's the weakest link in the neighborhood that creates that risk for all the neighbors.
Yeah, the other thing too to keep in mind, if you do have a recalcitrant neighbor, like I actually do, that's the side of the house I would put the most effort in terms of structural hardening specifically. Definitely do the D-space and all that. But, there are some basic things that we can do that are pretty economical in general with structural hardening. But that elevation, that side of the house that is nearer to the higher risk, if you will, that's the side of the house that I would immediately, as much as my pocketbook would allow, work on, improving the siding, switch from plywood T111 to something more appropriate for wildland urban interface area, like hardy board materials, things like that. Definitely put vents on there. I would not just put 1/8 inch vents on that side of the house, but I would definitely, spend the extra money there and get the Vulcan vents, because the Vulcan vents, with the heat of your neighbor's house or junk on fire, that radiated heat will close up the Vulcan vents completely. So not only are you keeping embers out, you're keeping the heat from getting through there. Stuff like that, I would work really hard. I almost even think about putting a cinder block fence instead of a wood fence between myself and the neighbor. Just the amount of risk you're able to reduce is going to depend on the financial wherewithal you have to do it. But that would be my thought there. If you've got that risk that isn't going to go away, try as best you can to reduce the risk on your own property. And then speaking of fences, what about, the question is, what about wood fences that are within the 5-foot area? Will metal fences be required in the future? Yes, probably first of the year, the 0 to 5 rule will probably go into effect. I'm imagining January 1. And if you're in a very high fire severity zone after the first of the year, assuming the legislation goes into effect, you will have 3 years if you're a new building, you have to do it immediately, but in about 3 years, it'll be retroactive, as I understand it. You'll be required to make sure that a fence attached to your house is non-combustible within that 5-foot area. Doesn't have to be metal. We were actually doing a presentation at a site in West County recently where we were looking at their fence, and it's a wood fence. And we kind of somebody in the group came up with the idea that, what you can do with that? You could take out that section that's wood, replace the stringers with, metal 2x4s, and then put hardy plank over it, paint it to match, and you won't even be able to tell, which is true. I mean, it's brilliant. And then you have a non-combustible 5-foot section that looks exactly, almost, like the rest of the wooden fence. Brilliant idea. Anyway, that's a thought there. Any thoughts, Chief, about that? Or am I correct? Am I guessing about the legislation? Are you aware of anything?
I'm not 100% on the date timeline on the legislation, but the WIC. So in 2015 was the Valley Fire. That was the first time I was listening to our firefighters talking about the descriptor of redwood fences basically being a wick running through the neighborhood and fire going down the fence between homes and then into homes and just continuing through and wiping out an entire block of a neighborhood. And so breaking that link is absolutely critical. And there are all sorts of different alternatives you can do to make that break. There was a discussion about a house similar to mine where you don't have 5 foot between the fence line and your neighbor's fence that runs parallel to the backside of your house. That will be exempt in the current standards because that's the fence. But where it then hangs the corner and runs perpendicular into your house, that's where you're going to be required. And to Roberta's point, I've contemplated myself trying to do a masonry fence of some sort between my house and my neighbor's house just to create that barrier.
Yeah, if you do it yourself, materials aren't terribly expensive. A lot of labor though for the cinder block wall. Let's see. Hardy material. The question is, I'm going to take a shot at this too. Is hardy material really I'm going to paraphrase this. Is hardy material really the only fire resistant material rather than non-combustible? Do you think it might be approved as a zone 0 fencing? Yes, zone 0 for hardy material, like I just described, the fence that the folks were where we brainstorm how to remedy this issue with the fence, the hypothetical, or not even hypothetical, real case I told you about. You could build a section of your fence out of hardy board, and if your fence is painted, you can paint it to look the same. Even if your fence is like, redwood or cedar, you could probably take a piece of that wood down to the paint store and go, hey, can you give me a paint color that's close to this, and then paint it, and from a distance, you probably won't even be able to tell. But hardy material per se is not the only state fire marshal approved material for siding in a WUI area. If you go to the California State Fire Marshal's office, they have a WUI materials listing, and you can go down, put on the filter for siding, look at the different siding materials you can use fire treated wood. There's some assemblies you can use that are not treated wood, but certain thickness of plywood, certain finish, things like that have been tested and approved. So you don't have to use hardy material. However, if you are replacing your siding, dollars to dollars, hardy material right now I've discovered is probably going to be not more expensive, maybe even less expensive than replacing your siding with wood. I just did a couple of months ago a cost takeoff for a little house I was thinking about building, and I costed out the siding for hardy plank instead of lap siding that would be wood, and the cost was actually a little bit cheaper using the hardy material. So that's something to think about too. We are 1 minute out. Any last thoughts on anything I just covered, Chief, before we close out? I think we got all the questions too. Okay, I guess we're done. Thank you guys for popping in and visiting with us. We have lots of exciting speakers lined up this year. In September, we're going to hear from Julie Atwood of the Halter Project. And we're going to do a Q&A style presentation with her. She's going to talk about her work with animals and how to ensure safety during emergencies for animals of all kinds, large and small. So click the link in the chat to register for this speaker series. And thanks, Chief, again for working with us to do this second seasonal outlook with Fire Safe Sonoma. And thank you again, all you guys attendees who pop in to watch these. We do this for you. Hopefully you find value in it. We don't want to do it if it's no value to y'all. And thank you, Team Fire Safe Sonoma. Thanks, Becca and Alina, for helping out. And we'll see you guys again next month, right? See you there. Thanks.